I just want him to be happy. Why can't I do that one simple thing? Sorry.
She sighed instead. He wordlessly released her, and she slowly took the last 2 steps down, legs shaking even with the cane's support. And that was that. Task complete. Chiaki supposed she should be elated to be able to walk up and down the stairs again, albeit at a snail's pace and, as always, with aid. But her churning thoughts, the swell of disappointment in herself and self-doubt, tempered any joy she might have felt. It didn't help she was still frustrated with her body's limitations. "Why?" he asked, stepping nimbly around her as he descended the stairs as well.
Huh?
Oh, why she was distracted. He would see through a lie, so she offered a half-truth instead.
I was just being a downer. Sometimes it doesn't feel like I'm making any progress on this at all.
You are. I estimate a few more months of physical therapy will remove your reliance on the cane. However, with modifications to your dwelling, you should be capable of living independently sooner than that. A funny feeling was born in her stomach as she listened to him, uncomfortable and twisting.
Oh. In a few more months, I can live independently again. That should make me happy, right? I don't like feeling like a burden, but if I can live on my own, he won't need to stay anymore, will he?
She'd never really thought about what Kamakura-kun would do once he didn't have to look after her anymore. She'd just assumed he'd stay with her. But what if he got bored or wanted to do something else? She still wasn't entirely sure what the one other thing he wanted was. What if they reached a point where his personal quest took him in a different direction away from hers?
I'm being silly,
she sighed later to Yumigami, whose response was to nuzzle her hand. Chiaki scratched her ears, letting the therapeutic action soothe her churning stomach. In the privacy of her room, she was free to confess to the rabbit on her lap.
First for fretting so much about not making him happy, then for this. I mean, if Kamakura-kun wants to leave when I'm recovered, of course it's his right to.
What was she even scared of? He hadn't even given any indication he would leave. And even if he did, that wouldn't mean they'd stop being friends. They could still stay in contact with phones or email. Those still worked. She did not want him to leave her. She liked how things were. She liked seeing his face early in the morning, and giving him hugs and setting the table while he made breakfast. She liked talking to him and playing games with him and even trying to decipher his inscrutable expressions. The thought of his absence left her feeling raw and hollow, and now it was forcing her to confront a question she did not know the answer to.
What happens after?
She'd thought about what she'd do after school, of course. Before everything went wrong, she had been looking at gaming companies to join, as a beta tester or designer or something. With Hope's Peak's credentials, she could have gotten a job anywhere she wanted. But now, the world was just so different. Was there even a place for a gamer like her in it anymore?
I just don't know what the future holds,
she confessed in a small voice.
And I'm kind of scared of facing it without Kamakura-kun.
It felt like she could have done anything if he were with her. She'd been counting on him being with her, wanting it. She couldn't even make him smile, and she had the nerve to want him to stay. How selfish of her. How foolishly selfish. As if sensing her owner was about to be swallowed up in depression and self-loathing again, Yumigami not so gently bit her pointed finger. Chiaki yelped and yanked her hand back, automatically lifting the digit to suck on the injury. She gave the rabbit a stern glare.
There are less painful ways to tell me to stop worrying, you know.
The gamer sighed.
but I probably needed that. Thanks.
Yumigami settled down, and Chiaki tentatively resumed petting her.
What would you say if you could talk, I wonder? Would you mirror my motto back at me? If you just do it, things will turn out okay?
She wasn't certain it was 100% true anymore. She'd tried to rescue Yukizomi-sensei and escape the maze, and neither had worked out. Though, the fact that she was still alive could be testimony to the truth in that phrase. There was still time for things to be fixed, wasn't there? Liquid brown eyes blinked up at her.
It's okay to get discouraged. It's okay to be upset. Take the bad as it comes, then keep going anyway.
They seemed to say. The pink-haired girl smiled tentatively.
Right. Okay. I'll try not to worry about that anymore.
She picked the rabbit up and nuzzled her against her chest.
Even though you can't really talk? Thanks.
Chiaki had grown complacent. It was easy to forget the state of the world, cozied up in her home with Kamakura-kun. She didn't like watching the news unless it involved her classmates, and she didn't really go into town anymore, so she was rather sheltered about current events. She did go outdoors, but the red sky had gradually become familiar until she barely noticed it anymore. It was almost as though they existed in their own little bubble, far away from everyone else. But though they ignored the world did not ignore them. And she was reminded of its realities late one night in early March. They'd decided that evening that they would watch an anime together, or rather, she'd suggested it, and he'd agreed with his usual disinterest, and had been surfing the channels for a suitable one. The Ultimate Despairs had control over the TV networks. They allowed little to play besides the news and Enoshima's propaganda, but made an exception for the most depressing of media. There wasn't a lot of room to be picky, but Chiaki knew she didn't want anything gory, and had already flipped past Berserk, Elven Lead, and Grave of the Fireflies before deciding on Air. She was trying to focus on the meeting between Yukido and Misuzu, not how Kamakura-kun's leg was brushing hers, when the screen suddenly crawled with noise. Chiaki frowned.
Did our receiver break or something, Kamakura-kun?
He'd already moved to check it. No. Just as he returned to the couch, the static cleared up, showing a classroom. Dominating it was a rocket, with a struggling man strapped to a chair inside. Chiaki leaned forward, squinting.
Is that Kirigiri Gakuencho?
She couldn't be certain since a blindfold was covering most of his upper face, but it certainly looked like the principal. Kamakura-kun experimentally changed the channel, but no matter how far he went, the image stayed. A Force Network-wide broadcast. He concluded, "It seems Enoshima has begun her next plan." Chiaki glanced at him, and a shiver ran up her spine. The Ultimate Hope's eyes were keen with something akin to anticipation. Boo! She turned back to the screen as a small black and white bear jumped into view, stepping disdainfully on Kirigiri Gakuenchu's legs as it approached the camera. It looked like a stuffed animal, yet its face was oddly expressive. It was smiling broadly as it waved. Hello, you bastards! It's me, Monokuma, the adorable mascot and spokesperson for the mastermind of this whole tragic state of affairs. Did you miss me? She blinked. A talking bear wasn't as odd as some of the other things Chiaki had seen in her games, or even in the real world. but the overly friendly attitude, the strangeness of the entire situation, left her speechless. Monokuma giggled as if he had actually listened to her reply. "Of course you did! I'm so lovable after all!" His face suddenly fell, and he kicked at a stray bit of trash. "Which is why everything I've heard hurts so much! Because I have heard quite some hurtful things. Whoever orchestrated all this has kind of fallen off the radar. Do you think they're dead? Maybe we can finally recover!" He blew a raspberry. "Boo, I say! I haven't stopped my work at all! I've just been biding my time, building up for a grand event! The magnum opus of my existence! The death blow to hope! And finally, a year after planning and waiting, my masterpiece is finally ready to be presented!" A rumble was building up from beneath the rocket, increasing in pitch. The principal began screaming incoherently, the words lost in the noise, and flailed furiously against his bonds. The bear sat down across from him in front of a large red button and gestured with a stubby arm. "But before we get started, let me tell you something about this man." Monokuma pointed a claw at Kirigiri Gakuenshu dramatically. "This man, the leader of Hope's Peak Academy, has committed numerous crimes against humanity, covering up murders, expelling innocent students, allowing human experimentation. He's done it all. It's a despairingly awful truth, but it must be known. This man is a criminal. And what do we do to criminals, my lovely viewers?" Monokuma pulled out a gavel and spun it around, slamming it down on the button with gusto. "We execute them! It's punishment time!" Beads of sweat broke out on her forehead, and Chiaki trembled as the words from long ago came back to haunt her. The camera zoomed in for one last look at the principal's face before the doors slammed shut around him. The gamer's ears rang as the rocket roared to life, fire flaring up around the bottom. It lifted slowly, an unstoppable machine drilling through the roof, causing the room to shake. "Oh, but don't think that was my piece de resistance," the bear continued as the rocket disappeared from view. No. You see, I think the world had forgotten something. No one is innocent. Anyone can fall into despair. And who better to showcase that than the last remaining students of Hope's Peak? The kids you all call your hope for the future? The kids you thought were safe? The kids you thought you could hide from me?" He laughed again. "Boo! Despair will always find hope. It will always seek those little bits of light out so it can smother them." The camera enlarged his single red eye until it was filling the screen, glowing menacingly. "And I'm gonna remind you all just how powerful despair is!" There was an explosion of sound as the rocket crashed back down. The camera panned back to show the wreckage. It had buried itself nose first in the floor, smoke was billowing out from the point of impact, and various parts were falling off. With a loud groan, the metal doors cracked open, and out tumbled the remains of Kirigiri Jin, former principal of Hope's Peak Academy. Chiaki stared and stared in horror as Monokuma gleefully exclaimed, "The second mutual killing game of Hope's Peak Academy has now begun! Be sure to tune in tomorrow morning, folks! You do not want to miss what these kids are going to do to each other!" End of Chapter 12. Author's note. Enjoyed the fluff of last chapter? Good, because we have now caught up to the timeline of the series proper. Time to bring back despair. I figured Jin's execution would be the ideal point for Junko to start her broadcast. And if she's broadcasting it, she'd probably want to narrate what's happening and what's going to happen, just to drive the despair in further. So even though Monokuma doesn't talk during the execution, I added it in as some behind-the-scenes stuff only people watching the broadcast saw. Also, Junko had to have people in charge of television networks, otherwise the Future Foundation would have been able to stop her killing game from being broadcast.